While I was away, my parents sold my seaside villa to pay off my sister's debts. They told me, "You didn't need it anyway, right?" I didn't reply. I just called the police. But there was a huge detail they didn't know. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. I was standing right here, on this veranda, looking out at the ocean. I remember the air was crisp, salty, and perfect. I'd just returned from a business trip to Southeast Asia 2 days prior, and I'd driven out to the villa to unwind, to reconnect with the peace of it all. I was gripping my phone, smiling at some pictures Sterling had sent me, when a call came through. The screen flashed with the words, "Dad." A small knot of unease tightened in my stomach. My father, Walter, rarely called unless it was about my younger sister, Blythe. "Adelaide," he began, his voice carrying a strange, forced confidence that immediately set my teeth on edge. "I need to talk to you." "Hi, Dad. Did something happen?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. I was still blissfully unaware that my world was about to be ripped apart. "It's about your vacation home," he said, and with those 6 words, the knot in my stomach turned to a block of ice. The beautiful ocean view suddenly seemed to lose its color. "The vacation home? What about it?" My voice was barely a whisper. He took a breath, and then he said the words that I will never, ever forget. "I've already sold it. The ownership transfer will take place next month." For a moment, I couldn't process it. The words floated in the air, meaningless syllables. Sale? Transfer? Our precious home? What are you talking about? I managed to stammer, my voice trembling so hard I had to grab the railing to steady myself. The wood felt rough and real under my fingers, a stark contrast to the surreal nightmare unfolding in my ear. "Blythe is in trouble," he explained, his tone shifting into that familiar, weary excuse-making I'd heard my entire life. "She failed at an investment, Adelaide. She has a $200,000 debt. And what does that have to do with our home?" Anger, hot and pure, began to burn through the icy shock. It started in my chest and spread through my veins like fire. "Adelaide, I thought you'd understand," he said, and the condescension in his voice made me see red. "Blythe needs the money. If we don't help, the collectors. You went ahead and did whatever you wanted, didn't you?" I cut him off, my voice now dangerously cold. My grip on the railing tightened until my knuckles were white. "You barely even used the vacation home," my father's voice grew more forceful, defensive. "Blythe's life is at stake. Is a home you rarely use more important than your sister's life?" That was it. That was the line. The casual dismissal of everything Sterling and I had worked for. The implication that our dream was nothing more than a disposable asset for Blythe's latest catastrophe. "That is Blythe's problem," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "To sell our home without our consent, how did you even manage to proceed with the sale?" "We would have to sign something. Sterling would have to sign something." "I demand you tell me how." I sensed a moment of hesitation on his end, a flicker of fear before he bulldozed on. "I had your signatures. The documents were already prepared. You forged them." The words hung unsaid between us, but we both knew. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat a sickening thud of realization. The depth of their betrayal was staggering. "Adelaide, listen to me," he pleaded, his voice shifting again, now trying to sound reasonable. "Blythe isn't at fault. She was just tricked." "No," I said, my voice like ice. "This is a crime. An unauthorized sale is fraud. Forgery is a felony. I'm contacting the police." I heard my father gasp on the other end of the line. "The police? Don't be ridiculous. How can you bring a family matter outside?" This isn't just a family matter anymore, I said, my voice firm. It's a crime. I looked out at the waves, at the home that held so many of our hopes. Dad, Mom, it's time you stopped cleaning up Blythe's messes. His words, bringing a family matter outside, just echoed in my head. Family. He dared to use that word, after everything. That one word threw me back in time, back to a sun-drenched afternoon when I was turning 5 years old. It's one of my earliest memories, and it's the memory that defined my entire childhood. For my 5th birthday, my parents gifted me the one thing I had been dreaming of for months, a bright, shiny, red bicycle with white tassels on the handlebars. I was overjoyed. I remember touching the cool metal, the smell of the rubber tires. It was mine. But that happiness didn't last long. My sister, Blythe, who was 2 years younger, toddled over, her eyes wide. She pointed a chubby finger at it and immediately started to wail. Want bike? Want bike? My mother, Meredith, scooped her up. My father knelt down in front of me, his face a mask of strained patience. Blythe wants it, doesn't she? He said, not as a question, but as a statement. You're the big sister, Adelaide. Let her have it. My small heart shattered. But it was my birthday present, I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. But my protest fell on deaf ears. In the end, the bike became Blythe's. I watched from the window as my father patiently pushed her around the yard on my birthday present, while my mother clapped and cheered. I was simply expected to understand. That was the first lesson, but it was far from the last. When I entered elementary school, I received a beautiful new pencil case, covered in glittering stars. It was a gift for starting school, a milestone. Blythe, of course, took an immediate interest in it. A few days later, my mother came to me with a plain, boring pencil case. We need to switch, sweetie, she said, avoiding my eyes. Blythe is still young, so she wants what you have. And just like that, the glittering stars belonged to her. It wasn't just things. It was opportunities. When I was 10, I desperately wanted to take swimming lessons with my friends. The community pool was offering a summer program. I begged my parents. They shut it down immediately. We're spending money on Blythe's piano lessons, my father said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. My mother added, besides, Blythe would feel lonely on her own. For Blythe, money was no object. There were piano lessons, ballet classes, painting tutors. Our family's financial decisions, our family's time, our family's attention, it all revolved around her. Meanwhile, I was only allowed to do free after-school clubs. Whenever I finished my homework and wanted to go play, I was told, help Blythe with her studies. She didn't want my help, of course. She wanted to watch cartoons, and I was expected to sit with her. The pattern was set in stone. Blythe wanted, Blythe got. Adelaide was the responsible older sister, the one who was supposed to understand, to sacrifice, to simply disappear. Standing there on the veranda, the ghost of that little girl who lost her red bicycle rose up inside of me, and she was furious. The feeling of being invisible didn't stop with toys or hobbies. It seeped into every part of my life, especially my achievements. It was like I was living in a house where the lights were always dimmed in my direction, but a brilliant spotlight followed Blythe wherever she went. Both of our parents attended every single one of Blythe's school events. Her piano recitals, her school plays, even when she was just a tree in the background, they were there in the front row, beaming with pride. But when it came to mine, they always had the same excuse, we're too busy at work. I remember my 4th grade sports day. I had practiced for weeks for the 100-meter dash. My heart was pounding as I stood at the starting line. The whistle blew, and I ran faster than I ever had before. I crossed the finish line first, my lungs burning, a triumphant smile on my face. I scanned the crowd of parents, looking for them. They weren't there. I found out later that they had missed my race because Blythe, who was in a younger grade, had fallen and scraped her knee during a 3-legged race. They spent the entire afternoon in the nurse's office with her, comforting her while she cried. No one even noticed I had one. During an open school day in 5th grade, I gave a speech as the class president. I had practiced it for days, my hands shaking as I stood at the podium. My parents had promised they would come. But they skipped it. They skipped it to attend Blythe's classroom event, where she was showing off a macaroni art project. When I was elected as a class representative again in 6th grade, I didn't even bother telling them. I knew the conversation would just circle back to Blythe anyway. But the moment that stands out the most, the one that truly cemented my place in the family, was in my 3rd year of high school. I worked tirelessly to get accepted into my first-choice university. I sacrificed weekends, pulled all-nighters, and poured everything I had into my studies and applications. The day the acceptance letter arrived, I thought, just for a moment, that this would be different. This was a real, tangible achievement they couldn't ignore. I was wrong. I showed the letter to my mother, my hands trembling with excitement. She glanced at it, her expression indifferent. "Oh, that's nice," she said, before turning back to the papers on the table. "I'm more interested in Blythe's mock test results right now." That evening at dinner, my mother made all of Blythe's favorite dishes. It was supposed to be a celebration of my achievement, but every single topic revolved around Blythe. Her school, her friends, her upcoming tests. No one asked about my hard work. No one shared in my joy. I sat there, invisible again, pushing food around my plate while my dream was treated like a footnote in the story of my sister's life. For Christmas, Blythe always received expensive gifts, designer bags, new electronics. I got practical items like stationery or clothes. Even the travel expenses for my club competitions were denied because the money was needed for Blythe's piano lessons. The narrative was always the same: Blythe is sensitive. Blythe is delicate. By the time I packed my bags for university, I had completely given up. I wasn't just leaving for college, I was escaping. University was my chance to finally be my own person, to exist outside of the shadow of my sister. It was during this time that I discovered windsurfing, and in doing so, I met Ken. I was a freshman, a total beginner, constantly at the mercy of the waves. On my first day of practice with the club, I was thrown into the sea countless times. I swallowed so much salt water my throat burned, and my eyes stung unbearably. Just as I was about to give up, ready to crawl back to shore and quit, a hand extended down to me. It was Sterling. He was a few years older than me, the captain of the club, with a kind smile and eyes that seemed to see right through the clumsy freshman routine. "Everyone starts like this," he said, pulling me back onto my board. I fell all day long when I was a freshman, too. I cannot describe how much those simple words saved me. Up until then, I had rarely experienced kindness in the face of failure. In my family, failure was something to be hidden or, in Blythe's case, excused and paid for. But here was someone telling me it was a normal part of the process. One particularly memorable moment happened on the final day of our training camp. It was dusk, and I was alone on the water, battling the waves. I hadn't managed to stand up for more than a few seconds all day, and this was my last chance. I was frustrated, cold, and on the verge of tears. "Adelaide! The wind is shifting," Sterling shouted from the shore. The moment I heard his voice, it was like a switch flipped in my brain. Everything suddenly became clear: the direction of the wind, the movement of the waves, the feel of the board beneath my feet. Before I even knew what I was doing, I was standing. I was riding the waves. I did it! I screamed, a cry of pure elation. My teammates on the shore cheered, but the only thing I saw was Sterling's beaming smile. Later, he gave me some advice. "Don't tense up on the board," he said gently. "Feel the waves and move with them." For some reason, those words deeply resonated with me, far beyond the context of windsurfing. No one had ever treated me with such care. My parents always focused on Blythe and showed little interest in my efforts or achievements. Adelaide, you've got a real talent for this, Sterling told me one afternoon. Your intuition for reading the waves is amazing. It wasn't just his technical guidance that drew me in. It was his kindness, the way he noticed my small improvements, and the occasional mischievous expressions he wore. A few months later, we started dating. He was the first person who saw me, just me, not as Blythe's older sister. He saw Adelaide. And for the first time in my life, I felt like that was enough. When I graduated from university, Sterling and I made a decision that seemed crazy to everyone else. We decided to turn our shared passion for marine sports into a business. We started an import company, specializing in high-performance gear that wasn't readily available in the US market. The people around us were against it. My parents, in particular, strongly opposed the idea. How do you plan to survive with such an unstable business? My father asked, his tone laced with disapproval. My mother, her mind still entirely consumed by Blythe, added, Diana is struggling, so you need to find a stable job and help the family. The irony was suffocating. They'd never supported a single dream of mine, but now they expected me to fund their coddling of my sister. We ignored them. We worked tirelessly to raise the startup capital. I juggled 3 part-time jobs, waitressing at night, tutoring on weekends, and working retail in the afternoons. Sterling borrowed some money from his family, who, unlike mine, believed in him. Our first office was a tiny, cramped apartment a full 30-minute walk from the nearest train station. All the furniture, the desks, the cabinets, was secondhand, picked up from garage sales. This is our starting line, Sterling said with a laugh, and I laughed with him. It felt like an adventure. Finding business partners was far more challenging than we had imagined. We were met with constant rejection. You're too young. You have no track record. We were shown the door time and time again. But we refused to give up. We attended marine sports tournaments all over the country, sleeping in our car to save money. We built relationships with athletes, listened to their needs, and gradually earned their trust. Our turning point came when we met a small, innovative manufacturer in Australia. They had also just started their business and were looking to expand into the US market. We flew there on the cheapest tickets we could find, our business plan practically memorized. Perhaps our passion resonated with them, because after a week of intense negotiations, we managed to secure an exclusive distributor contract. The night we signed that contract, we celebrated in our tiny office. We had a cheap bottle of sparkling wine and a can of smoked oysters we'd bought from the corner store. We sat on the floor, leaning against our second-hand filing cabinets, and talked about our future. We dreamed of a day when we could have our own warehouse, a proper office, maybe even a small home near the ocean. Looking back now, that might have been the true beginning of our journey. It wasn't about the money, it was about building something together, just the two of us, against all odds. The business, which began in that small, stuffy apartment, grew steadily. The years of hard work paid off. We moved from the apartment to a small warehouse, then to a larger one. We hired employees. We became a recognized name within the industry. And then, 5 years ago, we finally achieved the dream we had talked about that night on the office floor. We were ready to buy our vacation home. We began searching for a place by the sea, a sanctuary where we could escape the pressures of the business and just be together. We found this property shortly after we began looking. It was perched on a hill, surrounded by trees, and it offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the ocean that instantly captivated us. The house itself was a bit old, a little worn down, but it had good bones and a spirit that just felt right. This is the one, Sterling said, his eyes shining as he looked out at the water. I was thinking the exact same thing. My parents, of course, opposed it. It's unnecessary to spend so much money on such a luxury, my mother said when I told her. But their disapproval wasn't just about the money. They still hadn't fully accepted my work, my life, my marriage to Sterling. To them, my success was an anomaly, something unstable compared to the predictable path they had always imagined for me, a path that always involved propping up my sister. But their opinion didn't matter to me anymore. This was the proof of the dream Sterling and I had built together. This was our trophy. Fixing up the house became part of our story. We repainted the railings on this very veranda. We replaced the worn floorboards in the living room and renovated the kitchen from top to bottom. Every bit of work was done by the two of us on weekends. Sometimes we argued over paint colors or tile choices, but even those moments now feel nostalgic. On our first night here, we sat on the deck, wrapped in blankets, gazing at the starry sky. We listened to the rhythmic sound of the waves crashing on the shore below. Sterling took my hand, his grip warm and steady. "Adelaide," he whispered, "let's grow old together here." Those words still warm my heart today. This house wasn't just a piece of real estate. It was a place of dreams, a testament to our partnership, a promise of our future. It was everything. And it was what my parents decided to steal from us. Back on the phone, the world had shrunk to the sound of my father's voice and the frantic beating of my own heart. The word forgery hung in the air, a monstrous, unspoken accusation. "How could you?" I finally managed to say, my voice raw. "How could you forge our signatures, Dad?" "It wasn't, we didn't have a choice," he stammered, his confident facade crumbling into desperation. Blythe was getting threats. "You have a good salary, a successful business. For you, this is just a house. For her, it's her life." The sheer audacity of his logic was breathtaking. He was framing their crime as a noble sacrifice they had made on my behalf. My salary? My business? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. The business you called unstable? The life you never once supported? You have no right to talk about my money or my life. I started pacing the veranda, the phone slick with sweat in my hand. I want to know everything. Who is the buyer? What real estate agent did you use? How did you get copies of our signatures? My father was evasive. "Adelaide, this isn't necessary. We can sort this out as a family." "No!" I shouted, the sound echoing in the quiet air. "We are long past that. You committed a crime. A serious crime. I'm not just your older daughter who is supposed to quietly accept things anymore. I am a homeowner whose property has been illegally sold. I am a business owner whose signature has been forged on a legal contract. You seem to have forgotten who I am, so let me remind you." I could hear my mother, Meredith, in the background now, her voice a panicked whisper. "Walter, what's she saying? Tell her to stop." "Tell me the agent's name, Dad," I demanded, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Or I will find out from the police. And trust me, it will be much, much worse for you then." There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing heavily. Finally, defeated, he mumbled the name of a local real estate agency. "Thank you," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "You will be hearing from my lawyer." I hung up before he could say another word. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I leaned against the railing, taking deep, shuddering breaths of the salty air. Forgery. Fraud. They had planned this. They had sat down together and meticulously plotted to steal from their own daughter. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it felt like a physical wound. This wasn't a desperate mistake. This was a calculated act of destruction, and they had aimed it right at the heart of everything Sterling and I had built. After hanging up on my father, I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, just listening to the sound of the waves. The sound that usually brought me peace now felt like a mocking reminder of what I was about to lose. Then, a different feeling began to surface, pushing through the shock and the grief. It was a cold, hard resolve. They were not going to get away with this. I walked back inside, my movements stiff and deliberate. I sat down at the kitchen table, the one Sterling and I had picked out together. I pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over the keypad. For a split second, I hesitated. A lifetime of being told to keep it in the family, to not make waves, to protect Blythe at all costs, washed over me. My mother's tearful face flashed in my mind, my father's pleading voice. And then I thought of Sterling. I thought of his unwavering belief in me. I thought of our nights spent eating cheap takeout over spreadsheets. I thought of his promise to grow old with me in this very house. And my resolve hardened like steel. I dialed 911. My voice was surprisingly steady when the operator answered. I need to report a crime, I said. I believe my property has been sold fraudulently through the use of forged documents. I gave them my name, the address of the villa, and the names of the primary suspects, Walter and Meredith Moore. My own parents. The call was short, professional, and chillingly final. As I hung up, a profound sense of calm washed over me. The decision was made. The die was cast. There was no going back. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Sterling. Adelaide? Are you okay? Hearing his voice, so full of warmth and concern, the dam I had built around my emotions finally broke. A sob escaped my lips. Yes, I choked out. I just finished talking to my father. And the police. Okay, breathe, he said, his voice a steady anchor in my storm. I got a call from the potential buyer. It turns out they're one of my younger friends from university. A guy named Mark. He was so excited about the house, but he thought something seemed off about the story your parents gave him. When I explained the situation, he understood immediately. He's furious on our behalf. Adelaide, listen to me. The sale has been called off. Mark is backing out completely and is willing to testify. I let out a deep sigh of relief that was so heavy it felt like I was releasing years of pent-up weight. At least that was one problem solved. Thank you, Sterling, I whispered. That's not all, he continued, his voice grim. I also heard from the police. They've already contacted the real estate agent. They found the forged documents your parents used. His words made my chest tighten. It was real. It wasn't just a threat or a misunderstanding. It was a calculated, documented crime. How far were you willing to fall, Dad and Mom? Sterling arrived at the villa later that evening. In the middle of his workday, he drove 3 hours just to be with me. The moment I saw his car pull into the driveway, I ran out to him. He didn't say a word. He just opened his arms and held me tightly. And within the safety of his embrace, the tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. The following day, the police launched a full-scale investigation. My parents were brought in for questioning on charges of attempted fraud and forgery. The story that unfolded, piece by damning piece, was even uglier than I could have imagined. The police discovered that my parents had been planning this for 3 months. They knew from the very beginning that the property was jointly owned by Sterling and me, yet they proceeded anyway. The forgery of the documents was carefully planned. First, they managed to get a copy of my signature from an old birthday card I had sent them. Then, they skillfully, almost artistically, imitated Sterling's signature to falsify the agreement of sale. To the real estate agent, they spun a tale of woe. They lied, saying, our daughter and her partner are being relocated overseas for a big promotion and can no longer manage the property. They've asked us to handle the sale for them. They painted themselves as helpful, doting parents. But the most shocking revelation, the one that truly took my breath away, was what my mother, Meredith, had done. The police interviewed our neighbors near the villa, and they discovered that my mother had been spreading vicious rumors in the weeks leading up to the sale. She told anyone who would listen that Sterling and I were in financial trouble. She claimed we had racked up huge debts and were forcing them, her and my father, to clean up our mess. She was willing to tarnish her own daughter's reputation, to destroy my good name, all to create a plausible story to protect her precious Blythe. During the police questioning, my mother reportedly confessed, but her confession was just another performance. Blythe got involved in a fraudulent investment scheme, she tearfully told the officer. It was supposed to be just $10,000 at first, but before we knew it, it had become $200,000. My parents had drained their savings and sold off a small piece of land they owned to cover the initial debt. But even that wasn't enough. So they turned to our vacation home. And then she delivered the line that even the interrogating officer was left speechless by. Diana isn't to blame, my mother insisted, her voice full of conviction. She was just tricked. She's not as smart as Adelaide. There it was. The core belief that had governed my entire life, now being used as a defense for a felony. My intelligence, my success, the very things they had always ignored and resented, were now being twisted into a reason why I should be the one to pay for my sister's failures. I could hardly believe my own parents had resorted to such despicable actions. They weren't just trying to steal a house, they were trying to rewrite my entire life story to fit their narrative, casting me as the villain so Blythe could remain the eternal victim. A few days into the investigation, my phone buzzed with a number I knew all too well. It was Blythe. I almost didn't answer, but some morbid curiosity made me press the green button. "How could you do this, Adelaide?" she screeched, without so much as a hello. There was no shame, no apology, only pure, unadulterated accusation. Turning our own parents over to the police is cruel. They were just trying to help me. Her victim mentality was as present as ever. It was almost impressive in its consistency. I took a deep breath, refusing to let her drag me down into a screaming match. "Blythe, do you have any idea what they actually did?" I responded, my voice calm and even. "They tried to illegally sell the home that Sterling and I cherish, the one we poured our hearts into, just to cover your debt. They forged our names on legal documents. That's a crime. But we're family, aren't we?" she whined, the familiar refrain that had been used to manipulate me my whole life. "I'm really struggling here. You have so much, why can't you just help?" "It's time you started taking responsibility for your own actions," I said, my patience finally snapping. "I am done cleaning up after you." I hung up, and an overwhelming fatigue washed over me. Thinking about it, I started to tally up the cost of Blythe's struggles over the years. It had started small. During her first year of college, a college our parents were paying for with money that could have been a nice inheritance, she racked up a $3,000 debt on a new credit card. The reason? To go shopping for luxury brands with her friends. Instead of scolding her, my parents excused her behavior. "She's just a young girl, it can't be helped," my father had said as he paid off the bill immediately. 2 months later, we discovered she had misused her tuition money. The $30,000 meant for her education had been spent on trips with friends and new clothes. Again, my father dipped into his savings to cover the shortfall. "She lacks life experience," my mother said, defending her. "It's natural she doesn't understand the value of money." In her 3rd year, Blythe abruptly announced she was dropping out of college. "I can't keep up with the classes," was her excuse. Shortly after, she started working part-time at a restaurant, where she began dating a customer who introduced her to an investment scheme. She lost $38,000. When I tried to talk to her about it, she glared at me. "You wouldn't understand, Adelaide, because you're so smart," she said, as if I were the problem. My parents begged her to break up with the guy and, once again, they paid off her debt. Their retirement savings were nearly depleted. And now this. Duped by another fraudulent investment, she had accrued a staggering $200,000 in debt. This time, my parents had no means left to cover it. So they turned to us. They spoiled her to the point of ruin, and now they were trying to drag us down with them. A year has passed since that awful day. The legal proceedings concluded months ago. My parents were prosecuted and, thanks to a good lawyer and their age, they received a suspended sentence. They avoided jail time, but they did not avoid the consequences of their actions. I received letters of apology from them, filled with justifications and pleas for understanding. I discarded them without reading them. I've learned a hard lesson in my life. Sometimes, forgiving only enables the repetition of wrongdoing. According to a neighbor who still speaks to my mother's friend, my parents are struggling. After the fraudulent sale was exposed, the scandal forced my father into early retirement from his job. He lost his pension. My mother now juggles 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet. Early mornings at a warehouse, packing boxes at a food factory during the day, and working the register at a 24-hour supermarket at night. Their family home, the one I grew up in, has been sold to pay off their legal fees and the initial portion of the debt they took on for Blythe. They now live in a cheap, small apartment on the outskirts of town. Their retirement savings, their home, all their funds were depleted. Relatives called me multiple times. Adelaide, can't you help your parents? They are suffering. And every time, I gave the same answer. They will have to solve their problems on their own. They made their choices. And Blythe? She hasn't changed one bit. I heard she met a man at a nightclub and is now considering another foolproof investment scheme. When my parents, now powerless to help her, tried to stop her, she lashed out. I'm struggling and you're acting just like Adelaide, so cold-hearted. Just help me. But they no longer had the means. My father, I heard, collapsed during one of his night security shifts. The diagnosis was overwork, but he returned to the job without rest. He knows that if they fall behind on their payments, the collection calls will never stop. At the end of last year, I received an email from Blythe. Adelaide, lend me $50,000. I promise I can turn everything around with it. She had maxed out her loans, her credit cards were unusable. Cornered, she was turning to me. I didn't reply. Instead, I sent my parents publicly available information on counseling and debt relief services. That was the most I could do for them. This was the path they had chosen. Their blind devotion to Blythe had ultimately brought their entire family to ruin. If you're still listening at this point, please do me a quick favor. Like this video and comment with the number 1 down below. It lets me know that you've given me a thumbs up, and it tells me you're right here with me on this journey. Your support truly means the world and encourages me so much. So please, comment with the number 1, and I'll tell you what happened next. After everything that happened, it would have been easy to let bitterness consume me. It would have been easy to look at this house, this beautiful home, and see only the shadow of my family's betrayal. And for a while, I did. But Sterling, my wonderful, steady Sterling, wouldn't let that happen. One evening, as autumn deepened and the sea grew a little rougher, we were sitting out on the deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I was quiet, lost in thought. Ken came up behind me and gently placed his arms around my shoulders. You're not at fault, you know, he said softly. I nodded, leaning back against him. I had made the right choice. It was a painful, necessary decision, but it was the right one. I've been thinking, Sterling said, his expression serious. What if we use this house as a venue for charity events? I turned to look at him, intrigued. Charity? Yes, he continued, his eyes full of passion. Let's give underprivileged kids the chance to experience marine sports. Let's teach them how to windsurf, right here. Let's share this place. I was deeply moved by his suggestion. Having experienced the profound loneliness of being misunderstood and overlooked by my own family, I wanted to support children who might feel that same isolation. The idea of filling this house with laughter, with the joy of kids experiencing the ocean for the first time, it felt like the perfect way to heal. That's a wonderful idea, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Sterling smiled. Your parents saw this place as nothing more than a piece of real estate, a financial asset to be liquidated. But to us, it's always been a place of dreams. If we could share that dream with others. I took his hand in mine. Sterling always understood the deepest corners of my heart. Let's do it, I said with determination. And so we did. We changed into our wetsuits, and as we rode the waves together, I felt a pure sense of happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. Yes, my relationship with my biological family was lost forever, but I had chosen my own path, and that choice wasn't a mistake. Listening to the sound of the waves, we looked toward the future. This vacation home, once a target of greed and betrayal, will continue to nurture our dreams. And now, it will also become a place of hope for others, a place where new dreams, for kids who need them most, can begin. Thank you for listening to my story. And so, this story leaves us with a powerful reminder, the value of self-respect and the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it means walking away from those who should have protected and cherished us. Life often tests us through the people closest to us, and it is in those moments that we must decide, will we allow their choices to define us, or will we choose our own path, one built on integrity, resilience, and love for ourselves? This journey also highlights the importance of setting boundaries and understanding that love does not mean enabling harmful behavior. True love is not about sacrificing your dreams or well-being for the sake of others. It's about mutual respect, support, and accountability. When we prioritize our worth, we inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of strength and self-empowerment. What about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your peace and values? Share your thoughts below or simply comment good if this story resonated with you. Your voice matters, and your reflections could inspire someone else today.